Charlotte. Charlotte.
Hi.
Hi.
Well done, Zhixin. That was a great presentation, and also well done for figuring out research that requires you to do fieldwork in Fiji. That's amazing. My question is about, so you've presented the Pacific as kind of this playground for China and for these other powers and like competition between these global powers. And I was wondering where you saw like what the role of the Pacific Islands themselves are, like where do they fit into this competition, and if that was going to be part of your research at all.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and the reason the reason why I'm using topology is like it can bring different layers of power into the whole context, and it's like the outcome of infrastructure projects is not only about strong powers, and strong powers have also have to negotiate with the local powers, and also it's like the 14 Pacific Island countries are also aligning together to form their own voice in the international community, and this area has become more and more visible, not only due to the contestation between the strong powers, but also that when their voices are more stronger and more visible, and they have the power to compete against the others. So the topological power is like focuses on the dynamics. It's like on one end of the equation is China, on the other end is South Pacific. And that's why I'm looking at South Pacific as a collective, as a whole region. And it's like when you look into the individual powers, and they cannot compete against either New Zealand, Australia, the US, or China. But when you look at this space as a collective, and they kind of they have that special leverage against the strong powers, and they have their own power to negotiate with strong powers and then shape their positions in the whole global context.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Greg.
Thanks for that presentation and the great slides you had with it. I have a question about, I guess it's more topographical than topological, about changing boundaries. At the beginning, you presented this sort of conventional categorization on a map of the South Pacific, Melanesia, Micronesia, Polynesia. Mm-hmm. But in other slides, for example, that slide on Guangdong, it mentioned Brunei. New Zealand was mentioned in another slide. So yeah. I'm wondering, given with the sort of topological transformations of power, are we getting a more elastic definition of what constitutes the South Pacific? That, you know, it's kind of boundaries are shifting in different contexts, becoming a much wider region than the traditional breakdown into Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia? Thanks.
Yeah, those maps showed, like in the first few slides on my PowerPoint, is a demonstration of topographical understanding of space. And it's, I'm not arguing that the whole world is shifting to the topological space, but it's like different spatial frames have their own contribution to the series of geography, to the understanding of space. But why I'm using topology is dependent on my research questions. When you see power in topographical understanding, it's like the influence is radiated from one fixed location to the others. But when you see it within the topological frame, it's like the relationships are dynamic, and sometimes it's closer, sometimes it's a bit far away. And by using this proximity or distance, and it kind of created the new space for strong powers to exercise their different registers power. And another focus of my project is it's not really about how different boundaries or space are formulated, are interpreted, but I'm focusing on political geography and more for the space in international relations. And I'm also using topological spatial thinking in the power dynamics in Pacific Island states. So it's like, again, different kinds of spatial thinking has its own focus, and my focus is the new spaces and new forms of power that China created through its Belt and Road Initiative. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have two more questions, Erin, Lynn, and Sam Jardine, and then we'll be having to close. Erin.
Hey, Zhixin, that was fantastic. Really big ideas in there. And forgive me if this question seems a little naive, but in understanding the difference between topography and topology, is there a correlation with the ideas of hard power versus soft power? Like, would topography be more in line with ideas of hard power and topology be more related to soft power, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, I totally understand what you are saying. And it's like topological power kind of transcend or go beyond the traditional categorization of power, say softer versus hard. And it's like John Allen has put forward to a new notion of power unacquired. And it's like, it's just this new registers power can either be soft or be hard, or like the combination of both. And it works better by the controversy of China's buying like different, especially small islands. And it's like China is providing a huge amount of profit, and that profit is too much not to want. And then it's like it's like the power and influence is still about manipulation. Manipulation is still about persuasion, but in a more quiet and muted ways. It's not soft and hard binary. It sometimes is the combination of both.
Thank you. Sam.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could clarify a point you raised earlier, where you mentioned that in political science, infrastructure is usually approached from like the perspective of physical things like roads and so on. Do you think this is a blind spot in the literature where they simply don't think about more invisible forms of infrastructure, or is this just that the literature hasn't really caught up with recent changes in the expansion of digital technology. It's an important infrastructure layer.
Well, I haven't read any literature specifically on infrastructure, but what I'm trying to say is the academic discourse on BRI just focuses on the physical infrastructure, like ports, like airports, and these kind of infrastructure projects are used as evidence to show China's political ends or great ambition. And I'm not trying to say that's not the case, that's not a fact. But I'm looking at the new forms of power that China is formulated, and one form is the new infrastructure, which includes digital infrastructure projects, and it is also based on the most advanced, like internet infrastructure, internet network, and then China is using this broader definition of infrastructure to create more space, to create more possibilities to expand its influence. And
right,